Lucas, so I am watching something happening in the world of Bitcoin that is a little distressing. Have you had a chance to catch up on what Fedimints are at all? Is this a familiar term to you?
Not at all. Only heard about it 10 seconds ago when I read the title of the show. What is Fedimints? Or I
So,
should
so Fedimints are a mechanism on Bitcoin. It's a little complicated, but I'll at least throw one thing up so we can take a look at it and talk it through a bit more. The long story short of what's going on here is there is a binding to the Web 2 world that some had said was pretty undesirable. So I've got something on the screen about kind of what's going on here. And the reason that I had Mutiny Wallet up, so that was kind of what we started out with here, is there's this little graphic for Mutiny Wallet, and they that I don't know if they blocked him or what happened, but you know, Seth for Privacy, who we have featured posts for on the show at various points when we were talking about Samurai Wallet and different privacy aspects on Bitcoin, and ties in with what we talked about yesterday because we were talking about silent payments. So there's a lot of work being done in this space, but the reason we're talking about um, Mutiny and Fedimints is apparently they were using a couple of domains, and the domains that they were using, they've lost control of them. And so when they lost control of those DNS control, they're now saying funds could be at risk or could be lost. So this is what they're talking about. It's like, hey, you should be checking up on what's going on if you're using Mutiny, because they started using Fedimint custodian mechanism. So let me get this pulled up and we can talk through a little bit about what Fedimints are and why this is kind of important in the world of Bitcoin, because this is further developments around like what Bitcoin is trying to do and how things could work in the ecosystem, right? So
well.
um,
But let me pose a question to you before we get into Fedimints regarding what happened with Samurai. So when you say lost control of their DNS, somebody the Fedimints wallet, or I'm sorry, the Mutiny wallet, when you went to it, it was directed to another site, and so people were entering in their information, and it was not going into the actual Mutiny database, but somewhere else. Is that what was going on there?
so there's a binding within Fedimints that says there's a way that it interacts with DNS, and this is not obvious at the outset, right? That there is this binding, and honestly, when I first looked at Fedimints, I wasn't sure that this was something that I was super interested in because of this word right here. Immediately when I saw that there was some custody situation and that it was tied to Lightning, it's like, oh my gosh, like none of these things are interesting to me. Like I don't like Lightning in particular. I think my experiences with it as an L2 were not great. And the more I kind of kept peeling back the onion on Lightning, the more I disliked it. Then anytime that I see, some sort of a custody thing, oh my gosh, it's like, can I run away from this screaming fast enough? So I sort of got disinterested in it and didn't want to really, do much with it. And therefore I stopped looking at it. And when this came up, I thought it was at least worth noting is the fact that this had happened. And let me pull up the post. So just give me 2 seconds while I kind of furiously search to get this up and live, because I wanted to cover this, but I couldn't find this post where they were talking about the specific domain that they lost control of. So just give me 2 seconds to see if I can't pull it up quick, just so we can have it on the screen as we're talking about it, because it's relevant to the question that you were specifically asking.
Okay, well, and
Maybe you can ask Rusty about what's going on downriver of him, because like we were watching that that water situation, and what is it right there, right by his
Mexican
house? Yeah.
Mexican Hat, Utah, and the San Juan. I mean, not to mention the Rapidan. I'm not sure how to say it correctly. Dam there in Minnesota. Seems to be floods everywhere. Rusty, good morning. um, have you guys got a lot of rain in the Four Corners? Was that like a local storm right in the Monument Valley? What's the news that you have there from flooding on the San Juan?
We haven't gotten any flooding really bad here on the San Juan. Good morning. It's good to see you again, Lucas and Grant. I did see the stories about what was happening right there in Utah with the massive flooding, and that is insane to see that amount of water just going over. I was watching it live. Somebody did a post on X where they were recording it. They had to stop in the middle of the road, and they were just filming it. Entire trees just being washed down the road, and extreme mass flooding going on.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I was actually climbing in Indian Creek, probably in 2016, maybe, and got to see a flood, something along those lines. In fact, we were marooned. It was a joy over Memorial Day weekend for several days. So I do know, like, you can get some pretty small cloudbursts there that are concentrated in an area, and there's not a lot of absorption in some parts. And I don't know if you've ever been to Mexican Hat, but it is um, uh, not a lot of ground cover there. The San Juan and the bridge over the San Juan there in Mexican Hat is it sort of looks like it's like an old trestle bridge, like the one that went down in Iowa. Rusty, did you happen to see? Did you follow it all? I was tweeted out a couple of links yesterday with regards to the main. Oh, look there, Grant has it up for us. Look at that. Everyone, that is dangerous water, not to be swum in.
Yeah, and look at this is, what, high desert plateau country. This is not the kind of place that water flows like this usually, right?
I mean, very seldom, but very prone to flash floods because of the lack of absorption. So when you get a significant amount of rain anywhere there in the Red Desert on the Colorado Plateau, you get flooding like this. And quite often, I mean, it can come very suddenly. I don't know if you guys remember in the strip over by North Flagstaff on the north side of the Grand Canyon. There were several families who went to watch a flood like this and were washed away because uh, the flood, there was a significant more water coming than they were prepared for. Happens every year, and it will also amaze you how many people who flatlanders go up to the mountains in Colorado and don't realize how strong the water currents can be and get pulled under. This you could drive a car into that and your car would disappear. It would and people have, like, some people try to cross, like, the Dolores River. I know there was a Jeep a couple of years ago. People in a Jeep um, started to try to cross the Dolores whenever it was in a high rate of flow, and they got out, but the Jeep was never seen again. Because the water is also moving underground, shifting the ground quite a bit. It's impressive. But yeah, that is a cool area there. The Combe Ridge is near there. Did you guys happen to see
All right,
the?
hold on. Let's go back to Fedimints for a second because I got to.
Okay. Sorry. I go off.
Okay, so we opened the show talking about Fedimints. So if you're jumping in here, we're not talking about water entirely. So what happened here is there is a guardian, okay, and the guardian is bound to a DNS, and these are smart contracts, right? So certain amounts of things are immutable on the chain. And apparently, what happened was, there was some XYZ domain that had been incorporated within the protocol of Fedimints and the way that it was launched for Mutiny Wallet, and they, I don't know, failed to re-register it, or it's gotten into the wrong hands or whatever, and now the whole system has kind of gotten shook apart. So this was noted by Seth for privacy. He kind of said, "Here's what's going on. What's going on with Mutiny Wallet." And as far as what are Fedimints and how does this work? This is just like more things that are trying to be developed on Bitcoin, and somewhat, I think, still I would claim being hampered by the lack of the ability to do really good scripting on Bitcoin. So everything that we've talked about with great script restoration and other types of things that people are trying to build on Bitcoin, we really do need to get a few more opcodes so we can make better programs and make some stuff that has other kinds of facilities. But yeah, it looks like a mistake was made in Fedimints, mistake was made in the Web 2 world, and because of that, some amount of funds are at risk, according to whoever was using Mutiny Wallet and the Fedimints protocol there. So again, remember, all this stuff is kind of still early days. So if you're going to give it a try, only risk small amounts of sats, because who knows what might happen if you get into some of this stuff a little too early before everybody has a chance to really pick it up. But this is kind of the key, is that it's a third party custodial mechanism, trusted community, and I think that this is kind of the wrong approach for doing anything. But they were trying to pull something off, and apparently it catastrophically failed for Mutiny, and there's no way to fix it. So watch out.
Wow. Who do you think is the user that they were seeking to, it says to onboard their local communities to Bitcoin?
Well, the problem with Lightning is that you have to liquidize the channel. Okay, so if you're going to open an L2, essentially what you're doing is you're trapping some amount of coins so that you can do fast spending. So if you think about this like a cash register at your local donut shop, right? Donut shop, somebody comes in, they turn the lights on, and they go over to the cash register, and you've got to have some money in the till, right? If you don't have money in the till, you can't make change, you can't transact in cash. Imagine you can only transact in cash. This is pre-credit cards. You only have the ability to transact in cash. No cash in the till, you essentially do not have the ability to do commerce. Like, otherwise, what you'd have to do is wait for somebody to come in, pay an exact change, and then you'd have to wait until you could do whatever, and it just really wouldn't work. And this analogy breaks down a little bit because it's not exactly how Bitcoin works, but like, you can think of it like this, is that you need some amount of liquidity if you're going to do high-speed transactions on the L2. And so traditionally what's happened is the person who opens the L2 just puts their funds at risk. So what's been theorized here is that there's a different way that this could be done. And to my understanding, it's what Fedimints was trying to solve, is saying, okay, well, we as a community could put our funds at risk, kind of pool it up, and then we could operate this L2 so that one person doesn't have to take all the risk, and we can, act as a community to do something. And Fedimints was a way to, make like a trusted third-party custodian where, funds could be put into an L2. But apparently there's a binding to DNS and some other parts of the infrastructure of how the smart contracts are deployed in such a way that, you not only have to trust the smart contracts, but you got to trust that the guys that are operating the Web 2 infrastructure continue to do their job.
And is the DNS important because that's where part of the smart contract is hosted, or I don't.
No, I think it's that there's some amount of discoverability or some way that like you get connected to this thing, like, because this is a very age-old problem of like, well, how do you actually get into the swarm, right? And although this problem has been solved in very peer-to-peer ways, famously by things like BitTorrent, you still sometimes can take shortcuts and say, well, the way that we discover something is to use the DNS infrastructure. And so it's a common shortcut when you don't want to go the more complex peer-to-peer route of how do you actually find peers and how do you get routed. So I don't know the exact place where the DNS binding is, or I would have like led right into it, but there is some kind of a tie there, and maybe I'll do some sleuthing today and report back tomorrow, because I don't have a good answer for exactly why this binding exists. And I think it caught some people by surprise. other people said this is why I was never interested in Fedimints to begin with. So I'll see if I can't track some of those down, but I don't have an immediate answer for you about technically why DNS is in the mix here.
Maybe we can do a show on Splash and the peer-to-peer sharing of offer files, and harken back to this whenever we get there. I mean, would you say that that is something that's a solution for somewhat of the same problem?
Splash is trying to solve a slightly different problem, which is how do you have a decentralized exchange that is divorced from DNS? Like, instead of hosting something in one place that's bound to one URL, because that's a centralization point as well. I mean, think about it. If you go to dexy.space, right, that is controlled by Dexy. And if Dexy were to be served a takedown order, then the quote unquote decentralized exchange no longer functions. So you got to have a way to deliver a user experience which is not centrally distributed. That's what Splash is seeking to achieve, I believe. I haven't extensively looked into that one either, so I can't just immediately answer you what they're trying to solve. But it's not exactly the same kind of thing that Fedimints is trying to solve here.
I guess, well, not with regards to a pool to build the Lightning payments off of, but I think that, I guess what I was getting at is, it seems like more attention is now being paid to the, I don't know, the doors through which you walk, that you access blockchain information. So anywho, let's move on to Julian Assange. It's been a long time. He's what a story with Julian Assange. He was, for those who are not aware, Julian Assange took a plea deal yesterday with the United Kingdom. He pled guilty. Actually, I didn't even look if it was to the UK. I did notice Mike Pence had some blathering tweet about Julian Assange exposing the United States military to harm, which was the line of the CIA back in the days of extraordinary rendition. What did you think of the release of Assange? I mean, to me, he is a a patriot, maybe an expatriate. He's not an American. He's an Australian. He created WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks told us about the massive surveillance apparatus that had been created in the wake of 9/11 to ferret out terrorists. I don't know. I've long wondered if Julian Assange would ever be free, and I'm glad to see that I guess the legal cases against him have been resolved, even though a plea deal and pleading guilty wasn't what I had hoped for him. Rusty, Grant, what do you guys think? I know Julian Assange can be a very polarizing topic.
I like whenever somebody shines the light on government shenanigans, misdeeds, and I think that that's underselling some of what was exposed by Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks crew. I'm all for it, honestly. I think that the more transparency we have about the misdeeds of our government, the better. I thought it was fitting when Ron Paul talked about, how can we be doing this specific thing that we're doing? And actually, that was one clip that got surfaced yesterday when all of this happened that I was reminded of. So yeah, I'm glad to see this happen. I also know that RFK also praised the fact that this had occurred. So yeah, I'm a supporter. I'm glad this has finally occurred. I'm glad he's free. I'm saddened to see that he's being burdened with a $500,000 bill for his flight that he was forced to take. So bad things going on around it, but yeah, glad to see he's free.
Well, I didn't. I did not see that aspect of it. I did see footage of him boarding the plane, and $500,000 for that flight. That's kind of crazy. But hopefully there will be a community effort to pay for that. Rusty, you served in the armed forces. Perhaps maybe have a different view, or you're also in blockchain, the world of no secrets, or maybe that's one arm of blockchains. As as maybe we have a couple.
You know what, Lucas? I think
Yeah,
we've done this at some points. Why don't we just listen to this little clip of like Ron Paul talking about this? I think this one's great. Like it's kind of short, but why not just let this one rip for a second to give a little perspective?
sure. Give it a play. Love Ron Paul.
Can you hear it?
I can't yet.
Oh wait, I gotta remember the things that I gotta do as far as button presses to be able to do this. There's a audio setting where you've gotta.
We will consider this preparation for our streaming of the debates on Thursday.
Okay, here we go. Let's try again.
Mr. Speaker, WikiLeaks'
How about now?
release of
Turn it up.
classified information has generated a lot of attention worldwide in the past few weeks. The hysterical reaction makes one wonder if this is not an example of killing the messenger for the bad news. Despite what is claimed, information so far released, though classified, has caused no known harm to any individual, but it has caused plenty of embarrassment to our government. Losing a grip on our empire is not welcomed by the neoconservatives in China. That Saudi Arabia is a principal supporter and financier of Al-Qaeda, and this should set off alarm bells since we guarantee its Sharia-run government. This emphasizes even more the fact that no Al-Qaeda existed in Iraq before 9/11, and yet we went to war against Iraq based on the lie that it did. It has been charged by self-proclaimed experts that Julian Assange, the internet publisher of this information, has committed a heinous crime deserving prosecution for treason and execution or even assassination. But should we not at least ask how the U.S. government can charge an Australian citizen with treason for publishing U.S. secret information that he did not steal? And if WikiLeaks is to be prosecuted for publishing classified documents, why shouldn't the Washington Post, the New York Times, and others that have also published these documents be prosecuted? Actually, some in Congress are threatening this as well. The New York Times, as a result of a Supreme Court ruling, was not found guilty in 1971 for the publication of the Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg never served a day in prison for his role in obtaining these secret documents. The Pentagon Papers were also inserted into the congressional record by Senator Mike Gravel, with no charges being made of breaking any national security laws. Yet the release of this classified information was considered illegal by many, and those who lied us into the Vietnam War and argued for its prolongation were outraged. But the truth gained from the Pentagon Papers revealed that lies were told about the Gulf of Tonkin attack, which perpetuated a sad and tragic episode in our history. Just as with the Vietnam War, the Iraq War was based on lies. We were never threatened by weapons of mass destruction or Al-Qaeda in Iraq, though the attack on Iraq was based on this false information. Any information that challenges the official propaganda for the war in the Middle East is unwelcome by the administration and supporters of these unnecessary wars. Few are interested in understanding the relationship of our foreign policy and our presence in the Middle East to the threat of terrorism. Revealing the real nature and goal of our presence in so many Muslim countries is a threat to our empire, and any revelation of this truth is highly resented by those in charge. Questions to consider. Do the American people deserve to know the truth regarding the ongoing war in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Yemen? Number two, could a larger question be, how can an Army private gain access to so much secret information? Number 3, why is the hostility mostly directed at Assange, the publisher, and not our government's failure to protect classified information? Number 4, are we getting our money's worth from the $80 billion per year we spend on intelligence gathering? Number 5, which has resulted in the greatest number of deaths? Lying us into war, or WikiLeaks revelations, or the release of the Pentagon Papers? If Assange can be convicted of a crime for publishing information that he did not steal, what does this say about the future of the First Amendment and the independence of the internet? Number 7, could it be that the real reason for the near universal attacks on WikiLeaks is more about secretly maintaining a seriously flawed foreign policy of empire than it is about national security? Number 8, is there not a huge difference between releasing secret information to help the enemy in the time of declared war, which is treason, and the releasing of information to expose our government lies that promote secret wars, death, and corruption? Number 9, was it not once considered patriotic to stand up to our government when it's wrong? Thomas Jefferson had it right when he advised, "Let the eyes of vigilance never be closed." And I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, it's like a time warp, Grant.
It feels like so long ago. Oh my gosh, it's not that long ago, but like it feels like a million years ago, honestly. Where is Ron Paul on the floors of our Congress? I wish he was still there.
We have more voices along those lines. Ron Paul was basically alone at that point. I think we see a lot more pushback with regards to neocons, the Uniparty, Mike Lee, Thomas Massey. There's a whole bunch of them now, which love to see that. But
yeah, Ron Paul sort of kicked up the hornet's nest as far as breaking up the two-party system. I think it was Ron Paul who sort of first fractured the Republican Party into two pieces, and then we've seen a fracturing of the Democratic Party into two pieces. Who knows what happens as factions continue to rise within U.S. politics. I think it's going to continue a bit more, and we're going to see increasingly that there's going to need to be coalitions to get things done within the Congress.
It's interesting to think that that was the point at which Bitcoin was created. Think about the changes in I don't know, United States diplomacy and sovereign unity with regards to this notion of extraordinary rendition, of not honoring various countries as places where the United States could not go in and take a body, or much less where we had previously distributed. Sorry, I got an echo, Grant. I don't know if you can.
Oh, right, because I got the echo setting turned off. Hold on.
Go change that. I do love hearing my voice right back at me, though.
No, sorry about that. There we go. It should be gone now.
The thinking about both extraordinary rendition but also the changes that we begin to make with the dollar. Part of the reasons that we are where we at today with concepts like BRICS and the dollar being in question as being the reserve currency for the rest of the world is we proceeded when we couldn't get countries to give up their citizens or give up people that we had claimed were terrorists that we wanted to bring to quote unquote justice here in the United States. We would shut off their money, and so to me, this absolutely has everything to do with the creation of the Bitcoin. And not only that, but just in general, there were, I was in Argentina in 2007, and there were many people there who both had concerns about the price inflation and the monetary base inflation that existed in Argentina at the time, but were also not happy with the reliance on United States dollars, and they thought that there was some sort of answer in using the networks of computers, computer networks, what have you, to create an alternative. So here we are 20 years later, and we have different choices this time around. People say history repeats itself. I lean more towards the notion that history informs the future, and I don't think we actually repeat it over and over. But Rusty,
You know, after watching that video, did you hear him talk about the war on terror? When did that phrase stop being uttered? I gotta do like one of these Google trend searches or whatever to see when that fell out of the common
well,
speak.
I would say it went out of fashion in the Obama years, and maybe the end of the Bush era with the collapse of 2008, even leading into that. I mean, going back to this, you have BRICS up on screen. We talk about BRICS now as if it was an alliance of countries that joined together to create an alternative monetary system to the dollar. But what BRICS was leading into the collapse in 2008, the whatever we want to call it, the Great Recession, BRICS was an investment portfolio, and that was at a time. Also, I said the Bitcoin started in 2003. You know, one of the very first things that is recorded on the chain is an article from, I believe, the London Times, and if I remember correctly, it has to do with the quantitative easing in the United States. And quantitative easing is printing dollars so that you can give them out. And you know, we talk about printing debt or whatnot. It was just like creating more money. It was giving the Federal Reserve the ability to create more dollars so it could have them to hand out. And you know, this notion of just creating more money would solve the problem of some of the financial losses we had taken in the wake of both 9/11 and the damage that did to our economy, and then the money that we were spending to finance wars in other countries. And think of that as now we just create money out of thin air to send to Israel and the Ukraine.
Well, I guess there we got our answer. It sort of aligns with just about exactly the creation of Bitcoin is when the words fell out of fashion and stopped being uttered on TV repeatedly.
Yeah, remember those wonderful Amber Alerts going to fly in those years was an absolute nightmare. I would put my headphones in and turn them all the way up so I didn't have to hear the repeated Amber Alerts. It was again, it's. I mean, we live in a different world than existed before 9/11 and our war on terror. But our war on terror has been. We have abandoned many of our notions of liberty and taken them not only from citizens in the United States, but from the rest of the world. So Julian Assange, in my mind, absolute patriot. He understood what the United States was up to at a time whenever none of us would believe it. I used to travel and argue with those damn Australians all the time, but turns out often they were absolutely 100% right. Rusty, again, sorry, Grant and I keep going back and forth, but I really enjoyed that Ron Paul address from back in the day. Rusty, what do you think of Julian Assange? Is it where does he fall in your telling of U.S. history?
Oh, thank you, Lucas. Give me the blue pill. Keep all the secrets. No, I'm just kidding with you. Julian Assange is an interesting character. It's really interesting to me when people actually leak the secrets of the government and what's actually going on behind the scenes. I saw a post on Twitter the other day, and there was a picture of the last 5 presidents that we've had in our government. And, it was a pretty sad list of the last 5 presidents, and just going back and thinking of what's happened during their times while I've been alive. is really interesting. You know, you talk about my time in the military service and you want some of my views on how I think about it. I don't know how long of the rant I really want to get into about it, but I served during the time of the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism was just starting when I was getting into the military, into the Marine Corps. And so there are different, you know, levels of the military that you can join when you're getting ready to think about it. You know, there's, you know, you can be the Army, the Navy, the Marines, and then you can be non-infantry. You can be working on a truck. You can be driving a tank. There's a lot of different jobs. When I joined up, I went Marine Corps and I went infantry. My goal was to be sent to combat. Like I knew that we were going to go to combat. I knew that there was going to be a form of action for what happened in 9/11. I didn't know if it was, you know, the story that they told was true. I didn't know if that was what was going on, but I knew that I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in high school watching it on the news. And I thought to myself, you know, if this is real, there's going to be recourse. Something is going to have to happen if this is real. If this happened and this many people died, there's going to be some kind of reaction and recourse to this. And so I knew that there was going to be something that was going to have to be done. And I decided that I was going to take my part in that and do what I can. And I knew that there was going to be a lot of people that would have to sign up and go to this war to fight these combats that we're into. And I thought that it would be my best interest to go in there in my place to do it without having a family, with having extra brothers and stuff like that, to give a position in the combat instead of somebody else. And, you know, when you look at the way that I think about the military nowadays, you know, I have it tattooed on my arm, the way I think about the military. You know, it's right there on my arm. It says, I fight what you fear until I am what you fear. And that is the way that I view the military. You know, they are out there fighting what the United States citizens are told to fear, you know, war on terrorism, you know, the Vietnam War, and the Nazis back in the day, whatever it was that they were fearing is what the United States or the military went to go fight until they become the power that they are now fighting against. And there was one thing when everybody signs up for the military, they all have to take a pledge. And there was one saying inside the pledge that always caught my attention. It was, we have to fight all we had to fight all enemies, foreign and domestic. And just the fact that they put in there that the domestic part is implemented in there, that we have to fight foreign and domestic on behalf of the government, was always something that intrigued me, and I felt that stood out to me when I took that pledge. And it's something that I see is kind of losing itself nowadays when you look at the National Guard and how it has been implemented into the Army, and the way that the Army is now fully composite of the National Guard. It used to be back in the day, the state's National Guards were kind of like the state's power, and the states had the ability to send out the National Guard kind of on their behalf without having to interact with the government and bring in the governmental power. Now that has really changed, and now it is all the government, and it is all the governmental power. And I don't think that that's a good choice. I don't think that was a good change. And I don't think, and it goes into me thinking, you know, back again, where is the real power and who has the real power? And I remember back when I was in the Marine Corps back in 2003 to 2007, almost 20 years ago, even then, BlackRock was a major entity, was a major corporation. And I remember I would have lots of friends that would get out of the Marine Corps after the 4-year tour, and they would join BlackRock as a company. They would get hired on to BlackRock for their skills. And it took a lot of my friends, because they would go from a job where they're militarily trained and they're only making about $30,000, $40,000 a year, to go into working for BlackRock, where they could get paid $200,000 a year to be doing basically the same job that they were trained for. And it got me to thinking, you know, BlackRock really has a very large army and a very large amount of power even back then. And now with their control of Bitcoin and with the way they're buying up Bitcoin, I really think that BlackRock is almost their own country in the amount of power that they have. I saw you wanted to speak in, Lucas. I've gone on for a bit.
Oh, I am. Well, I appreciate you getting into. I had suspicions that perhaps it was some of that era of history that led to your military service. When you say BlackRock, are you talking Blackwater, or do you mean BlackRock?
I might be mean Blackwater. I might be getting those two a mistake. I remember just the black was a big thing of it. And I don't know if black water and black rock are really two in the same or two completely different things. I just remember that there was a company that they went to go work for that they were getting hired on to like basically it was a civilian military over in Iraq, and they were getting paid to like basically work in the armories, work on the bases, and work on doing different things alongside our military. And they were getting paid extraordinary amount of amounts compared to what we were getting paid in the military. And so it was really easy for people to switch right on over as soon as they got out and join them. I
Yeah,
see
I think,
Lucas has pulled it up here. You might have some answers.
I think you're right. I think it's black water, not black rock.
You know, I was just thinking of black water this morning, even as I was thinking about all of this. You know, Grant, can you pull up a Wikipedia page for John Sherman of the Sherman Anti-trust Act of 1890? Because I think it's very interesting to get into military history and understand that John Sherman, who was one of the minds behind the creation of the dollar, and again, everyone talks about going off the gold standard as if it happened in 1930, or I thought it also very interesting that that Ron Paul brought up Watergate with Nixon, because you know what Nixon did was not take us off the gold standard. He admitted that we had long been printing more dollars and sending them out through the world through things like the Marshall Plan and through the IMF and the World Bank. After that, to other countries to control them, you know, give them money and you can control them. Well, John Sherman certainly understood that, because Rusty, you also brought up the state militias and the politicians of the 1860s. The radical Republicans especially understood that if you wanted to take over the militias that existed in the several states, then you could start paying them. You know, you can tell somebody what to do, or you can pay them to go do something. And that was part of the airdrops, the massive airdrops of greenbacks that occurred in 1861 and 1862, is actually to pay the military. And then once they had their bags, then it became part and parcel to use the military to enforce the railroads. And it was John Sherman who insisted, I believe he was a senator at the time, but after the Civil War, when the railroads were sent out west, and railroads become such a very crucial part of the formation of the West. But John Sherman said that, well, it must be absolutely implicit that the military is there to protect the American corporations. And I thought that was very fascinating, because prior to the Civil War, certainly during the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, and the Civil War, we had a very different notion of military. In the Constitution, it talks about the granting of letters of marque. Do either of you know what a letter of marque is?
No, tell us what a letter of marque is.
A letter of marque. Think about the pirates, the Barbary pirates, and going back to Britain and its control of the seas. The British Crown would you know, you have a boat. Oh, okay. We're going to the king or queen will sign a letter that says you can attack whomever you want from other countries, but we get a cut, and we will never put you in jail for that. And that is a letter of marque. So this notion of
there's a word I haven't seen in a long time: privateer.
Absolutely. Haven't the privateers satisfied their greed? Is there some soldier's wife who ever is in need? So it's very interesting.
I feel like there's a Decemberist song that features that. Now maybe it's Legionnaire I was thinking about, but God, they ought to have a song that has the word privateer in it.
There must be. It's a great word. And also going back to I don't even know what poem I quoted there. Haven't the privateers satisfied their greed? Anyway, but we had a different notion of who fought wars at some time, and to me, a definition of capitalism or private, separate from government, is the allowing of an individual to fail in order to protect the greater whole. So how very interesting that we changed that, and also it was both a progenitor of the United States monetary system that we have today, as well as, look at that, oh, the Legionnaires' Lament. Well, Legionnaires go back to the French.
Right, but I mean, that's why I was thinking about Privateer. You got to be familiar with that song. Like, it's no way that you don't know that one.
You sent me that there was a Decemberist album recently. I'm not a huge Decemberist fan. Who's the lead singer for the Decemberists? How are we on the Decemberists?
Colin McCoy, I think, something like that.
Yeah,
Colin.
yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, yeah, the only reason I brought it up and thought about it because I was like, oh, Privateer, yeah. But anyway, keep telling us about Letters of Marque.
Well, it's, the Constitution gives to the federal government the ability to grant letters of marque when it's and so it just goes back to in granting letters of marque, and to call up the militias is a very different concept of how the defense of the several states was to be run than the one that we currently have today, with the notion of a standing army, a military. We talk about the military industrial complex.
It was much more federated, from the perspective of, like, it was intended to be these several states with a very small, limited federal government, that wasn't supposed to be so centralized the way it is now. That was how it was intended.
Absolutely. And even federal, do you know where federal comes from, or the word federal?
I'm not familiar with that etymology. I'm eager to hear.
Confederation. If you go back before the Constitution, we have the Articles of Confederation. And when you look at to what confederation means, it means by of your own volition, voluntary. And so the Articles of Confederation was the notion that the states were coming together because they wanted to. And then we drop that off to have the notion federal under the Constitution. So there is some sort of implication of a change in that understanding of force. This is also why, and we're going to have Nathan on tomorrow. I wonder if he's aware. I don't know. I've never heard a lawyer make a note like, look at journalists and reporting on federal proceedings. They will talk about the federal court, but they'll never say a federal trial, because if you look at the case docket for a decision from a federal court, it is a and now the word just runs out of my head. It is a tribunal. And where do we get the word tribunal? Like, well, going into the Act of Confederation.
Yeah, but look at where I looked it up, Lucas. We can't just go to like a common definition. I had to go to the Noah Webster's 1828 definition of words, because if we want to know what words are supposed to mean, we can't go with what they've been, commonly become understood now. Especially if we're going to read ancient documents, we got to go back to dictionaries that existed at a time when the words were defined to mean very specific things. So,
well, and I think it important too to the Confederacy that they were emulating with the Articles of Confederation was the Confederacy of the Iroquoian nations, or the Algonquin nations, the 5 civilized tribes. We no longer include in sort of the narrative of American history the story of Hiawatha, but very much.
Well, they do where I'm from, because like every other street, place, and name is some Native American name. It's kind of crazy, actually. There's a Hiawatha is one of the major roads that you have to drive down with some frequency where I live.
Well, that gladdens my heart. But we see a shift in American, I don't know, the American narrative to Thanksgiving, like how like hold up Thanksgiving and Squanto versus versus Hiawatha, and tell me, like, do people know more about Thanksgiving? Are you aware of the political history of Thanksgiving?
I mean, only as the American mythology, like
Well,
you know,
did you know there used to be a Republican and a Democratic Thanksgiving?
no.
Two presidents have shifted the date of Thanksgiving, FDR and Lincoln. Thanksgiving used to be prior to Lincoln. Thanksgiving was, I believe, in October, All Saints Day. But Lincoln wanted to focus on this narrative of Squanto, the Pilgrims, et cetera, and moved it halfway there between Christmas. I mean, even this notion of federal holidays is something that is very touchy. Like for the federal government to be telling states what to do is I don't know. It would have been much more against the norms at one time. So one of the best ways to start, if not handing out money, is to create holidays or vacations. FDR moves also the Thanksgiving back another week in order to give a bank holiday before Christmas. It was absolutely a monetary decision to place Thanksgiving where it was today. Where it is today, and for many years after Lincoln and after FDR, people would celebrate Thanksgiving on different days. But again, like going back, I mean, even when you dig into who Squanto was and what was going on with the politics of I think it's the Narragansett. I forget the Powhatan tribes. I think Squanto. Squanto went to Europe for several years and
Well,
came.
here I pulled up something like
The Patuxent. Yes. So Squanto had left the United States and lived in England for many years, and he comes back to the United States later. I think like in the mind of many people, like like the time between, say, Jamestown and Thanksgiving is compressed into a year, but there's 100 years. We'd have to actually dig into it, but it 1580, okay, 1492 to 1580, so 30 years. And in that time, the Patuxent tribe had melted away, died of diseases, and joined the surrounding tribes of the Algonquins. So look at to what Squanto means. By the way, Squanto is the name that he gave the Pilgrims. But I think it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek name. I forget what the actual translation of the name Squanto means, but I think it means liar.
Really? All right. Well, let's see what if Noah Webster's got something on Squanto.
Yeah.
Nope.
Well, I don't know how.
Imagine we'd have to look that up in whatever language Squanto is actually a word originating from, right?
Yes, like Algonquin. We'd probably have to look it up. Anyway, keep an eye out for it, and I wish I was better prepared to stumble off into that. I don't know how we go from Julian Assange to John Sherman to Squanto, but long story short, the narrative of what it means to be a patriot certainly changes with the passage of time. We lived in a different world in 2003 and the wake of the WikiLeaks revelations. Look at how Bradley Manning or Chelsea Manning, look how quickly that was accepted. Edward Snowden, also very interesting.
Well, Lucas, here the repository of all knowledge we keep coming back to, that is Wikipedia. Here we are. Let's see. Closely spelled his name, nicknamed him Squanto. Historians believe his proper name, meaning for the rage of the Manitou.
Yes, there we go. The rage of the Manitou. That was not his original name. He was upset at there's the Haudenosaunee.
It's shocking to me how much I know how to pronounce all these words because I live amongst these words. I mean, it is like so prevalent here in this part of these United States that almost every street, body of water, major thing is named according to native naming. It's kind of shocking almost
Well,
that how much I just take it for granted.
we have this narrative today that the United States was built on the concepts of Roman and Grecian order and hearkening to Plato's Republic and the Polish Republic that it existed. We also say separation of church and state every time. If you can find where it says separation of church and state in the Constitution or the Articles of Confederation, please show it to me because it doesn't exist. And we were moving away for that phrase separation of church and state was a detente that was solicited about in Europe, where you had the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church. But even the Reformation comes. When does Martin Luther posts his theses on the wall of a cathedral in Worms, Germany, in 1521, and that was after Christopher Columbus brought back members of the New World back to the court of Ferdinand and Isabel, and later they went to Rome, where they had great. Look up Quintipec. Quintipec is there's a fascinating book of one of these native thinkers, native philosophers, who went to hold TED Talks with the archbishops, the Catholic hierarchy, and that's where these notions of emergent order come from, and the pilgrims and peoples from Europe who were coming to the New World wanted to embrace that concept of life. That is why they emulated the cacique, that's CACIQUE, the cacique system of order, of chiefs and democratic expression, democratic confederation. All these words are using the English and Latin language to describe a world order that was newly discovered, and the early
I do not know how to spell Quintipec.
Kwente.
K. I would have thought Q. Okay.
Well, there's both. I mean, it's at a time also before we have this notion of again, like spelling. When you go back to English too, like English is a syntactical language. You as a programmer might be very interested in like the difference between analytical and syntactical languages. But what's the difference between English and Latin? English is put together with spaces and is clausal, and Latin is put together with vowels and rolls all together. Must agree. So, I'm going to speak in Spanish for everybody here. But they operate under a very different rule set, and it's very interesting that grammar is an AR verb from Latin, and you have Latin priests trying to enforce, in a syntactical language, spelling is less important.
That's what makes English so impossible, is that our modern English is like this jumble of all these different things that it's sort of accreted over time, with some words coming from French, so much of it borrowing from French, but like a lot of it borrowing from other languages and other traditions. And that's why, so many words have these just like crazy esoteric spellings with these weird characters and very bizarre locations. It's really hard to wrap your head around if you don't live inside this language, and if you aren't familiar with some of the reasons for various roots and suffixes. It can be a daunting language to try to wrap your head around.
Absolutely, and think about the media's attacks on Donald Trump whenever he was campaigning and was later president. Like, there's all these notions that he doesn't make sense, who would speak that way, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, I took a look at that and I say, like, it's if anyone, well, like anyone who goes through school also learns this bizarre notion that we write differently than we speak. And this goes back to concepts of power and the the Latin and Catholic sort of control in Europe, and how that was used to I don't know, to subversively take over places like Britain and the Frisian countries. You know,
I'm also reminded of how many nautical and baseball terms there are in our common way of describing things. You know, it's so prevalent that a lot of people use it and they don't even realize. But Lucas, I don't know if you noticed, but we've sort of burned our time away. We didn't quite get to the student loan forgiveness thing, so we might have to pick that up on Thursday. Just a reminder to everybody, we've got a guest on tomorrow, so we're going to have Nathan Hansen, who's running for judge here in Minnesota, has agreed to come on and have a chat with us about some legal matters, about his campaign, things that we care about with respect to liberty, freedom. So it should be a good discussion. Lucas, I know you did some pre-work. Do you want to give us a preview of something that we might talk with him about tomorrow?
well, I would love to both know sort of what the expectations or what his expectations are in holding that seat, you know, in a state appellate court, sort of like, I've never actually spoken with a judge of an appellate court, so it'd be interesting to get his ideas as to what the powers, what the mission of that position is. I would really like to get into some of you know, anytime we have a Supreme Court justice, like you go and listen to the congressional hearing when the senators are interviewing the candidates, and they all talk about this balls and strikes. And I think, and fast forward to the Trump indictments and the Trump trials that we have seen, Trump trials and tribunals. You know, it seems obvious to me that we have that justice is political, and especially when there is no king, going back to those previous notions of a king or God that rules a group of people from the top down. We tried to have an emergent system of justice that we call an adversarial justice. With why tribunal? So this notion that you can call three people together onto a floor. They're all advocates for a different viewpoint: a judge, a defense, a defender, and a prosecutor, and that can, from three different viewpoints, illuminate some notion of truth. Well, we've gotten a long ways away from that concept through stare decisis, which goes back to a court case shortly after the Constitution, Marbury versus Madison. I would be interested in seeing if we can get Nathan to pick apart some of the touchy tension between where truth comes from and how a judge is supposed to handle that. So he might roll his eyes and fall asleep, but those will be what I'm leaning towards. Be interesting also to get him to even like maybe pick up where we left off today and talk about the student loan forgiveness and whose place that is, because it doesn't seem to be the executive's place, as this is the second time Biden has tried it, and it was overturned by the Supreme Court previously, and now we see states challenging it and federal judges issuing injunctions against it. But interesting conversation today. I enjoyed it, and everyone dig into history and John Sherman. Fascinating time to be going on with. So, anything else from you guys before we close it?
Nope. Great show. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, everyone.